Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be doing my round 4 tips and predictions for the 2024 AFL season. This is obviously a gather round. It's the second year in, I believe, the 4-year deal technically. I believe it's till 2026 where they're doing it in Adelaide, where every game's played there. And it's going to be, I think, a really awesome next few years because I went last year for the St Kilda game and it was an excellent experience. We stayed the night and it was a really, really good time and I enjoyed it a lot. So it's great that they're going to be continuing to do it. And I think it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a good round. Hopefully the games are good. And it's going to be starting tomorrow night with Thursday night footy with Adelaide versus Melbourne. Adelaide are coming off a very disappointing game against Fremantle where they just could not move the ball, and when they were able to get it inside 50, it was really poor kicks. Fremantle guarded the ground really, really well. They squeezed Adelaide and they just had no freedom in their ability to score. Taylor Walker didn't have a good game. Fogarty was quiet. Burgess wasn't too bad, but they just haven't had the freedom that they'd played with last year, and they aren't scoring anywhere near as well as they did last year. I think their efficiency has been the worst this year, even worse than teams like West Coast and North. And so that's a really, really disappointing thing. And they're coming up against one of the best teams in the league in Melbourne, who are supposedly getting Stephen May back. They are coming off a pretty good win against Port Adelaide in Adelaide as well. So they're going to have familiarity with the ground. They're going to know how to defend it. They're going to be really good in the stoppage as always. And I think they're going to be able to be a bit more damaging going forward. And they're also going to be a bit more damaging through the middle. Max Gawn should have a good game. And I think players like Oliver and Petrarca will be a bit more damaging than what the Adelaide mids have been, because that's been a real struggle with Adelaide so far, finding the good users and not being so one-paced in there. And so I also believe that with Melbourne being able to play there last week, it will help. And that's why I've got Melbourne winning in what should be a pretty good game, 17 points, and might be a bit of cause for concern for Adelaide this year. The second game on the Friday is going to be Brisbane versus North Melbourne. And Brisbane have really struggled this year. They're 0-3 now. And this is their second week off the bye after losing poorly to Collingwood up at the Gabba. So they're already 0-2. And they're not looking very good. Their midfield has slowed down. They're not getting the same burst out of there. Their forward line has really, really struggled. Eric Hipwood hasn't been able to take a mark, it seems like, in the last 2 games. Joe Danaher has been good, but has been in and out of games. He's found goals without really impacting it too much. Charlie Cameron hasn't been at his best. There's a lot of things you can point at, and I just think that it's really good timing for them to be able to get North Melbourne, where their forward line can get back into form. North had a exciting game, I think you could call it, against Carlton on Good Friday. It's going to be 2 weeks in a row where they're playing the early Friday fixture, which we very rarely see, which is quite fun for them. And I'm just not too sure if it's going to be a thing to watch for North Melbourne fans. It could very easily blow out to about 10 goals, but I just think that they'll get back to form and win it by about 8-9 goals for Brisbane win to get them back on the board. Then the Friday night game is going to be Port Adelaide versus Essendon. Port coming off a relatively disappointing loss against Melbourne. They were close but never quite there. And then Essendon were coming off a really good comeback win against St Kilda, where they just kept throwing things at St Kilda, and St Kilda were able to hold on for a little bit. And Essendon kicked 2 goals, 6 in the last quarter, with Stringer's goal from outside 50 getting them over the board. And it's a really, really good win for them. There's still going to be no Peter Wright, and I just think Port Adelaide will want to bounce back. It's going to be in Adelaide as well, and they'll need to get this win. So I have them winning by a relatively comfortable 4-goal margin. Minimum. It shouldn't be anything close. Sydney, just one of the best teams, even though they lost to Richmond. They should bounce back quite comfortably. And then this, I believe, is going to be game of the round. It's good that it's at Adelaide Oval and not one of the smaller grounds. Fremantle have been arguably the most informed team, or at least top 4 this year. They've really defended the ground perfectly in every game. They've squeezed every team they've come up against to the point where they can't move the ball freely at all, and that's really good. Their forward line has been a bit more exciting than it was last year. Luke Jackson has been in terrific form. Caleb Sarong has been exceptional this year. Could be top of the Brownlow by this stage. And they're just really, really good this year. And then Carlton, obviously, they're 3-0 as well. And they're coming off a good win against North Melbourne, who it's going to be interesting for them because they're coming off one of the worst defensive teams. And then they're now going up against one of the best. So it's whether their forward line can fire again. I think with it not being in Perth, and I think Carlton's midfield being a bit more bulking, bit stronger, a bit more physical, I think they'll be able to get an edge there. And I think Fremantle might struggle a little bit to score. And so I have Carlton winning by 10 points because I think this is going to be really close and it's going to be a really strong contested game. Another good game this week is going to be Western Bulldogs versus Geelong. This is also at the Adelaide Oval, and I believe this is the Sunday game now. And it's Western Bulldogs coming off a West Coast game, so not much really to say there. And Geelong came off a really, really good win against Hawthorn, where they were just able to hold Hawthorn back. They kicked something like 6 or 7 goals in the first quarter and really just sort of were able to maintain that lead. Even though Hawthorn came back a couple of times, they were just able to keep them at arm's length, and it was a good win. No Dangerfield again, and I think that'll be able to potentially struggle with that against a really good Bulldogs midfield, even if Bontempelli might not be playing because he did possibly pick up an injury. He didn't look fully fit. He played a lot more key forward, and it looked like he went to Jeremy McGovern a little bit to try and nullify his impact, and it worked. And I think someone like Liberatore might have one of the best games of the year this year, coming up against a Dangerfieldless midfield in Geelong. But I think they're going to be able to get over the edge slightly, even with a not necessarily super strong team. I think the extra athleticism in their forward line Geelong might struggle a little bit with. They need to get the Tom Stewart matchup correct. That's probably going to be the biggest matchup of the game. And even though they might struggle with Hawkins and Cameron, I still think that Waitman might have a great game and Ugle-Hagan should get back on the board. So I'll have the Bulldogs winning by about 3 goals. Then we have the Gold Coast and Giants game, and this could be a very interesting game. Giants and Gold Coast coming off the bye. GWS have probably been the most informed team of the year. They've come out with a real point to prove, and Gold Coast are obviously wanting to be that exciting team that jumps into the 8 under Hardwick with the new coach. And I think it's certainly plausible. They've started relatively well. They've started 2-1, obviously 2 weeks ago losing to the Bulldogs in Ballarat. And then the Giants were able to beat Collingwood in a really good game, and then they beat North and West Coast afterwards. So no real tough opponents for 3 weeks, which might affect them a little bit, but I still think they're going to be a bit more solid. I think their list build could be quite similar, but I think the Giants probably have a couple extra years in them. They've got a bit more of a bullish midfield. I'd rather have Briggs over Witts at this stage. I think he's able to impact the game a bit more around the ground, and I think that Sam Taylor, Buckley, Iden, Himmelberg, they'll really be able to contain the Suns key forwards, and that'll get them over the line by, again, around about 3 to 4 goals. And then the St Kilda Richmond is going to be another game that could be quite interesting, if not for the fact that Richmond have lost 3 key players. They might regain Martin and Grimes back, but it doesn't necessarily look likely. They've lost Lynch, they've lost Baker, they've lost Bolter. It could be a bit of a danger game for them, where it could blow out the lead. Floston had a terrific game against Sydney. I thought he was exceptional and really was a leader down back for them. A couple of their younger players, as I talked about in my round review of fine margins, a couple of their younger players really stood up, I thought, and showed a fair bit. But St Kilda are getting Max King back, and with a relatively weak defensive line with only Miller and Young being very inexperienced, think Max King has the highest goal average against Richmond as well. It might be a bit of a danger game for them. St Kilda are coming off a poor loss against Essendon, where they were able to control the game for the first 2.5 quarters, couldn't put it on the scoreboard, and then they struggled to contain Essendon in the last, where it was just inside 50 after inside 50, and they never really were able to get enough chances in the last to get it back, and it was pretty poor kicking inconsistencies in front of goal has killed this team over the past 10 years, and the fact that they still haven't changed it is very frustrating for me. But they should get back on the board, and I think the margin will potentially be at least 5 goals, and it could very well be more. And then the last game of the round is going to be the Jack Ginnivan Cup. It's Collingwood versus Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval, and Collingwood came off an excellent win against Brisbane. Their mid got back into form. Dacos went back to halfback, and I thought some of his kicks were really, really good. It was damaging. He was able to get that burst that he didn't have in the midfield because he wasn't in that role of necessarily being an in and under. He doesn't need to be a contested player. He doesn't have the body for it. And so it was a really good win for them to get back on the board. And then Hawthorn at times challenged Geelong, but I just thought they weren't as clean as they normally are. Jai Newcombe got back into a bit of form, was a bit more bursting out of the stoppage, but I think they struggled to contain Cameron and Hawkins, but a lot of teams do struggle with that. And I just think that with Collingwood getting back on the board again in a really good win up at the Gabba, they'll want to continue this form and should get a win by about 5 goals as well. And that wraps up the round. If you like this video, please hit the like button, really help push this video in the YouTube algorithm. Leave your thoughts on who might win in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel, there's going to be a bit more content on the way. I've already recorded a couple videos and hoping I can get them out within the next 2 weeks because I'm on uni break. And thanks for watching.